Some crimes grow cold and stay cold, but sometimes the truth has a way of clawing its way back to the surface. In this episode, we dive deep into a collection of once unsolved cases with shocking twists. Some that went unsolved for decades and others that ended in ways no one saw coming. I'm John Genoa. This is America's Strangest History. We're looking at 7 haunting cases you probably haven't heard of. Cases that remind us it's not over till it's solved. And these are cold cases with insane twists. January 6, 1982, Bobby Jo Oberholzer is last seen leaving work around 7:50 p.m. She had an argument with her husband and decided to hitchhike home. Annette Schnee left her job hours earlier and was also believed to be hitchhiking. January 7th, Bobby Jo's body is found 10 miles south of Breckenridge. She'd been shot in the chest. Her backpack and personal items were found scattered, and an orange sock was found with her body. July 3rd, 1982, Annette's body is found 6 months later in a creek bed. She'd been shot once in the back. Notably, she was wearing the matching orange sock to the one found with Bobby Jo. Investigators initially struggled with the lack of witnesses and random nature of the killings. A key break came from a snowplow operator who remembered rescuing a man stuck in a snowdrift near where the women disappeared. The man was Alan Phillips, and his behavior struck the operator as odd. At the time, there was no DNA database, but the orange socks still provided a thread that kept the case alive. In 2020, DNA evidence recovered from Annette Schnee's glove was uploaded into a genealogy database. Genetic genealogy linked it to a family tree that ultimately pointed to Alan Lee Phillips, a then 70-year-old mechanic. Investigators used covert surveillance to obtain DNA from a discarded fast food napkin which matched the crime scene sample. In September 2022, Phillips was convicted on multiple counts, including 2 counts of first-degree unaliving. Prosecutors argued Phillips unalived both women after offering them rides while pretending to be a helpful stranger. Now, this case stunned Colorado, not just for its brutality, but for the quiet life the responsible party led for nearly 40 years. He did all this while hiding in plain sight. But justice finally came round, riding on a snowstorm and an orange sock. September 20th, 1988. Gail is last seen leaving a local cafe in downtown Battle Creek, accompanied by a man described by a waitress as having long hair and a gray jacket. September 26th, her body is discovered by hunters off River Road, partially buried under debris. She'd been subjected to physical, non-consensual violation and manually strangled. 1988 to 1989, police questioned known offenders. One name, Roger Plato, stands out. He was a suspect in several assaults. He's ultimately unalived in a shootout with police in an unrelated incident weeks later. Physical evidence was collected from Gail's clothing and body, including biological material. At the time, DNA testing was limited, but blood samples were taken from Plato post-mortem. Over time, the evidence was presumed lost, and the case remained cold for over 30 years, though detectives still believed Plato was the likely responsible party. In 2020, while auditing old evidence lockers, a technician discovered a mislabeled box. Inside was the original blood sample taken from Plato during his autopsy. As luck would have it, the sample was intact. Modern DNA testing linked it to evidence found on Gail's clothing. In 2021, authorities publicly named Plato as the person responsible for unaliving Gail. Though justice came posthumously, the revelation brought closure to Gail's surviving family. Sometimes all it takes to solve a case is one overlooked label on a forgotten freezer box. July 5th, 1980, Stephanie Summers' body is discovered in her apartment after neighbors report a foul odor. She'd been subjected to physical, non-consensual violation and manually strangled. Curiously, the scene showed no signs of forced entry. Early 1980s, police conducted interviews and collected biological evidence, but without modern forensics, no match was made. The case inevitably went cold. Neighbors recalled seeing a man visiting Stephanie regularly before her death, but descriptions were vague. Initial theories included a boyfriend or someone she'd recently dated. Police pursued several leads, but none panned out. The physical evidence, including DNA, was preserved despite the lack of progress, and it sat untested for years. In 2014, as part of a broader initiative to clear backlogged non-consensual violation kits, Stephanie's case was re-examined. DNA from the scene was uploaded into CODIS. A match came back for Harold Anthony Parkinson, a man already in prison for a 1988 physical non-consensual violation. At the time of Stephanie's unaliving, Parkinson lived less than a mile from her apartment and had a record of prior violations. Parkinson was charged in 2019. During the trial, he claimed the encounter was consensual. Prosecutors argued otherwise. In 2021, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Stephanie Summers was denied justice for decades. Thankfully, advances in forensic science and the persistence of detectives who refused to let her case be forgotten finally gave her family answers. Sometimes the key to solving a crime is not the evidence itself, but the decision to look at it again and again and again and again until you get it right. August 4th, 1981, Sylvia's father discovers her body in her home. She'd been subjected to physical non-consensual violation, stabbed multiple times, and manually strangled. The suspect entered the bathroom window after cutting the phone lines. The scene showed clear signs of a violent struggle. Police pursued several leads, including acquaintances and local offenders. Two serial killers, Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole, falsely confessed, but their involvement was later debunked. DNA evidence was collected but remained unmatched for decades, and by 1983, the case went cold. In 2020, evidence from the original scene, including DNA recovered from Sylvia's body, was submitted for analysis using genetic genealogy. Investigators used a discarded Coke can to collect DNA from David Dwayne Anderson, who was living in Nebraska. The DNA was a match. Anderson had a prior record of burglary and was living within miles of Sylvia's home at the time of the unaliving. He was arrested in February 2021. During interrogation, he made inconsistent statements but never confessed. In October 2022, he was convicted of first degree and sentenced to life without parole. This case stood unsolved for 40 years, but the evolution of forensic science and the rise of familial DNA and genealogy databases turned a cold case into a courtroom conviction. Sylvia's family waited decades for justice, and in 2022, they finally got it. September 18th, 1998. Bonnie leaves a party with her boyfriend, Crespin Perez. She's never seen again. Days later, Perez tells friends that Bonnie left town after an argument. Her family doesn't believe it and reports her missing. Police question Perez, who denies involvement. With no body, no evidence, the case stalls. Months later, police receive an anonymous tip that Perez had unalived Bonnie and buried her body in New Mexico. The tipster was never identified. No remains are found, and the case remains cold for more than a decade. In 2013, skeletal remains are discovered in a remote area of northern New Mexico. DNA testing confirms in 2015 that the remains belong to Bonnie Baker. A second tip comes in, this time from a former acquaintance of Perez. She says Perez confessed to the crime years earlier. By 2019, Perez is living in Mexico. U.S. authorities work out with the Mexican government to secure extradition. Now, he's arrested and returned to Colorado in early 2020. In court, he pleads guilty to second degree and receives a 30-year sentence. For 15 years, Bonnie's family lived without answers. It took DNA, a pair of skeletal remains, and someone brave enough to speak up. In cold cases, silence is powerful, but so is truth. August 31st, 1976, Patricia Otto disappears from her home. Her husband Ralph Otto tells police she left voluntarily after an argument. Their daughters wake up to find her gone, her purse and keys still in the house. Ralph insists she left him. Police initially treat the case as voluntary disappearance. Patricia is never heard from again, and no body is found. In the 1980s, the case is reopened as a possible homicide. Patricia's daughters remain suspicious of their father, Ralph, but no hard evidence connects him to her disappearance. In 2000, detectives reclassify the case as a likely homicide. In 2017, advances in genetic genealogy help identify victims of the Bear Brook unalivings in New Hampshire, and where 4 bodies in 4 barrels turn up. The person responsible is confirmed as Terry Rasmussen, a drifter with multiple aliases. Records show Rasmussen was living in the Pacific Northwest in 1976 under an alias. Patricia, Otto's daughter, recognizes the pattern and suspects a link. While not conclusively proven, investigators believe Rasmussen may have been involved in Patricia's disappearance, possibly while using a false identity to get close enough to her. Terry Rasmussen died in prison in 2010. Patricia's body has never been found, but her case has gained renewed attention as part of the Chameleon Killer's trail. This is a case still awaiting final closure. But one thing is clear, the truth about Terry Rasmussen is still unfolding, and Patricia Otto may have been one of his earliest known victims. December 19th, 1979, Michelle Martinko, a high school senior, goes to Westdale Mall to shop for a winter coat. She never returns home. Her body is discovered the next morning in her family's Buick parked outside the mall. She's been stabbed multiple times in the face and chest, and there were no signs of a physical non-consensual violation. Police interviewed dozens of classmates and acquaintances. Several suspects are considered but cleared, and the case remains cold for decades. The only major clue is blood found at the scene, DNA that didn't match Michelle. In 2006, the DNA sample is uploaded to CODIS with no match. In 2018, a new technique is used, genetic genealogy. A public genealogy database helps narrow the pool to distant relatives of the suspect. Investigators build a family tree and identify Jerry Lynn Burns, a relative who had never been on police radar. A covert collection of his DNA from a discarded straw confirms a match. Burns is arrested in December 2018. He denies knowing Martinko, but can't explain why his DNA is at the scene. In February 2020, he's found guilty of first degree and sentenced to life without parole. It took 40 years, a scientific breakthrough, and relentless detective work to bring Michelle Martinko's killer to justice. I think that a big takeaway from all this is that cold cases don't stay cold forever. Behind every DNA sample, every forgotten evidence box, every overlooked clue, there's a name, there's a story, there's a truth waiting to be told. These stories remind us that justice has no expiration date. Sometimes it only takes a new tool, a new perspective, or a new person who refuses to give up to finally bring the truth to light. This is America's Strangest History. If you enjoyed this video, please click like and subscribe to see more. Till next time, thanks for watching.